The dead man at my feet used to be someone's accountant. I can tell by the lanyard. Pemberton Financial, Employee of the Month, March. Still swinging gently as he drops. And I think, Employee of the Month, parking spot with his name on it. Probably brought donuts on Fridays. Probably had a daughter who called him Dad in a voice that made the whole commute worth it. Now he's obstacle number 4 of 6. I file the thought. There's work to do. My name is Mireille Ashford. I'm 20 years old. I own the largest weapons manufacturing dynasty on the continent. I've buried everyone who tried to erase my bloodline, and the last time I slept more than 4 hours was during the previous administration. I move through dead cities at impossible speeds because a blue rain fell 9 months ago and rewired my nervous system in ways no scientist alive can explain. And I mean that literally. There are almost no scientists alive. I save people I don't know because a woman who smelt like lavender and gun oil spent 14 years teaching me that stillness is where speed comes from. And I'm what the industry calls a bad assassin. Not because I lack skill, but because I keep making the catastrophic professional error of caring about things. Chronic condition. I've tried treating it. Doesn't take. The speed works like this. Every second I borrow from the gaps in time, my body demands 3 back. 10 seconds of impossible speed costs 30 seconds of disorientation, the world moving at the wrong speed, my internal clock insisting it's a different hour than every watch in the room. 60 seconds costs 3 minutes of my brain trying to exist in 2 moments simultaneously. 5 minutes borrowed and you don't come back at all. You get stuck, frozen in the gap between one moment and the next, like a record skipping on a single note. Forever. I've seen it happen once. A man standing in an alley on the east side, eyes open, perfectly still, not breathing. Not dead, just elsewhere. Some part of him is still in the gap between 2 seconds that happened 6 months ago. The rest of the world had moved on without him. The speed is a loan with compound interest. I'm careful about my debts. Right now, I have 6 obstacles, 90 seconds, and a 12-year-old girl who has 4 days before an infection kills her. I breathe out, find the stillness, step sideways. The world doesn't slow down anymore, not like that first night when the blue rain fell and reality cracked open like an egg. Now I'm the one who changes. I step sideways through time, into the gaps between seconds where nothing can follow. All 6 in 40 seconds. They don't see me. Not one. My hands know what to do. The emotion goes somewhere else for now. I'll deal with it later. That's the arrangement. I'm in the supply cache. 3 bottles of antibiotics right where we left them. Into the pack. I check them before I check myself. Priorities. The route out is different from the route in, always, and on the 7th floor I hear it. Not 2. Not 5. Many. The sound fills the stairwell like water filling a room. Hundreds of them, climbing with the patient persistence of things that have nowhere to be and all the time in the world to get there. They're between me and the ground. Going up then, not using the speed. Saving it. The migraine is already building, the bill coming due. 13th floor, 14th, 16th. Roof access. Unlocked, confirmed 3 days ago. I push through. The sky is the wrong color. Blue rain. A wall of pale precipitation moving across the city from the east, turning the air warm in ways air shouldn't be warm. 9 months ago, that rain remade me. Behind me, the dead reach the roof. Dozens. Ahead, the next building, 12 feet away across nothing. I breathe out. Find the stillness, run. 3 seconds, launch, empty air, impact. Alive. Behind me, one of them steps off the edge, falls 17 stories. But it tried. They're learning to jump. I file this in the same cold place I file everything, and run for the fire escape as the first drops of blue rain hit my skin. Warm. Wrong. Familiar. The migraine spikes, my vision fractures, multiple moments are stacked on each other. Too much speed today. Too much. I get out of the rain. That was yesterday. Today, Isla is sleeping off her first dose of antibiotics, and I'm still paying the bill. Internal clock wrong by 3 hours, the world running 2 beats behind itself. I'm thinking about how I got here. Not to this room, to this. To understand that, you need to know about the warmth first. You need to know about my parents. Part 1. The Architecture of Love. The Ashford estate sat behind hedgerows so old they had opinions. My mother ran Western operations of Ashford Defense Systems with the same precision she used to debone a chicken. Efficiently, completely, without making a mess. Thursday evenings, she'd dismiss the kitchen staff and cook herself. By 7, the house smelled of paprika and bread and garlic browning in butter. I'd sit on the marble counter watching her hands. Taste this. What's missing? Acid. The fat needs something to argue with. Exactly right. She squeezed lemon into the pan. The sauce woke up fighting. Strength is good, little bird. Independence is better. Never let the world decide who you are. She smelled like cedar and something warm I've never found again. She called me her impossible girl. She meant it as the highest possible praise. My father played piano late at night, slow, deliberate, each note given room to breathe. He taught me himself. Fingers curved, like you're holding an egg. Why? An egg requires respect. Force, and it breaks. Ignore it, and it falls. You hold it with attention. I'd rush through difficult passages. He'd wait, let me hear my own mistakes in the silence between notes. Music lives in the spaces between the notes, he said once after I'd murdered a particularly delicate section. The rests are as important as the playing. Silence is where the speed comes from. I didn't understand that then. Moving between heartbeats and dead cities, I understand it now. His coat smelled of clean detergent and metal. His hands were always slightly too warm, the kind of warm that makes you notice how cold your own are. He'd find me wherever I was in that vast house and sit beside me, his hand resting on the back of my chair. Not touching, just near. The way a warm wall feels near in winter. He called me Mira, little wonder. He said it the way other people say hello, as though my existence was the most natural thing in his world. Every few months, the date of 3, he'd rent an entire amusement park for the evening, gates locked, lights burning gold, just us. My mother packed the basket herself. He made hot chocolate he'd whisked until it foamed. At the arcade, he'd pretend to lose at skee-ball. Dad, I can see you missing on purpose. I'm having an off night. You've had an off night every time for 6 years. My mother, examining her nails. I don't know what either of you is talking about. Once, caramels from a candy apple dripped on my chin. He wiped it away with his thumb. The same hands that signed off on missile guidance systems. You're sticky, he said. You're slow, I replied. My mother laughed. A real laugh, not a networking laugh, and I filed it away. Precious, finite, mine. I was 8 when they told me what love actually was. We were on the carousel. My mother is beside me. My father is standing between us, one hand on each pole. Mira, do you know why we do this? Because it's fun? Because it's ours, she said. Out there, people see us as transactions, as leverage, as opportunities. But here, with you, we're just 3 people who chose each other. You didn't choose me, I just showed up. We chose to keep you, my father said. Every day. That's the better kind of choosing. He looked at me in a way that required me to hold very still. The world will try to take this from you, this certainty that you matter, not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. People who are truly loved are dangerous. They can't be bought the same way, can't be broken as easily. I didn't fully understand then. I've spent 6 years understanding it since. Everything they built in me, the warmth, the music, the amusement parks rented for 3, was deliberate, architectural. They were building something the world couldn't touch. They were right. The world has tried comprehensively and failed. Part 2. The Woman Who Smelled Like Lavender and Ammunition. The nanny arrived when I was 4. Lena Voss. Pewter hair, always controlled. The posture of someone told to stand straight who never stopped. She smelled of lavender, and something beneath it I'd identify at 12 when I started working with firearms. Gun oil. Official title, child care specialist. Technically accurate, the way of calling a scalpel a cutting instrument is technically accurate. On her first morning, she found me in the kitchen watching the cook work. "What are you doing?" "Watching." "What for?" "I don't know." "Then you're not watching, you're just looking. They are not the same thing." She handed me a carrot. "Hold it at its center, flat palm, don't grip it." A pause. "Don't let the carrot feel lonely." I stared at her. "It is a metaphor," she said, without inflection. "For now." I balanced the carrot on my palm, found the center point, went still. "Good," she said. "Remember that feeling. When the world moves too fast or too slow, you find that center and hold it." I was 4 years old and already understood this woman was going to change the shape of my life. I was correct. Hide and seek became lessons in undetectability. She always found me, every time, immediately. How? "You shifted your weight when I entered the room. I barely moved." Barely is not never. Everything she said sounded like a fortune cookie written by someone who'd actually been in a war. Count your heartbeats. Fear makes you loud even when you're silent. Practice being still even when you're frightened. Find the place between heartbeats where nothing moves. And then, live there until it becomes home. By 7, balancing a kitchen knife by its spine across 3 fingers. By 9, target practice. Breathe out slowly. Fire at the bottom of the breath. The body is most stable in the moment between exhale and the next inhale. That is where stillness lives. I breathed out, held the stillness, fired. Dead center. "Let's see if the paper circle likes you better next time," she said. I hit the center. "Yes, so the paper circle likes me." The paper circle's opinion is not the metric I'm optimizing for. At 10, "Why do you keep teaching me to be still?" "Because stillness is where speed comes from." "That's the opposite of physics." She moved, so fast I missed it, and her hand was on my shoulder. I was perfectly still, then I was here. The stillness is the launch point. Without it, speed is just flailing. But if you can exist in the space between moments, a pause, you move through time instead of in it. Is that actually possible? It will be, she said, someday, and when it is, you need to be ready. She knew, even then. I didn't understand until the rain fell. Hey, you're still here. If this story is resonating with you and you haven't subscribed yet, taking a second to do so really helps me keep creating stories like this. All right, let's get back to it. I had a regular life too. I want to be clear about this. My best friend was Dasha, loud, confident, wrong about 40% of everything, arguing for all of it with equal ferocity. 4 brothers and the specific social competence that requires surviving 4 brothers. Your nanny looks at people like she's calculating something. She's just focused. Mireille, I have never once seen that woman blink. She blinks. I've been watching for 3 years. I haven't seen it yet. Then there was Felix. Quiet, patient, wanted to be an architect. He had notebooks full of buildings that didn't exist yet. He described them at lunch, the load-bearing walls, the natural light, the specific way space could make people feel safe. "What's this one?" I asked once. A community shelter, post-disaster, designed to feel like a home instead of a bunker. People recover better when they feel like people, not like survivors. I thought about that years later. Standing outside a school full of people slowly starving, deciding whether to knock. Felix and his buildings that didn't exist yet. I knocked. I was happy then. Genuinely, unperformatively happy. I didn't know it was ending. Part 3. The fire that unmade everything. I was 14 when they died. A Tuesday, late September. Sky is the specific blue that appears when autumn hasn't quite arrived. Lena took me for ice cream at 3:15, unusual because she didn't tend toward spontaneity, ice cream, or anything without tactical purpose. At the parlor, her phone showed a notification. Her face didn't change. "Finish your cone," she said. "Is something—" "Finish your cone." Mint chocolate chip, already melting. She made 2 calls on the drive back, brief, clipped. The people on the other end spoke less than she did. When we turned onto our street, I could see the smoke. The mansion was standing, technically. Fire doesn't always consume everything. Sometimes it takes the inside and leaves the exterior, a shell with all its beauty intact and all its substance gone. The west-facing library survived, windows intact. Evening light caught the glass. What caught their attention now was the reflection of smoke. Lena held my hand for the first and only time, didn't say anything. I stood with melting ice cream dripping onto the pavement and watched the shape of everything I'd known collapse inward like a dying star. Sedative in the evening wine. Electrical fault. No criminal charges. The distant Ashford relatives arrived within 3 days. I watched them from the hotel room where Lena had hidden me, and I want you to understand something about these people before I tell you what I did about them, because they deserve more than a quick description. They deserve to be understood. Marcus Ashford was 53 years old when he murdered my parents. He was my father's first cousin, born 3 months after my father, raised in the same house for 3 years when their parents briefly lived together, separated when the family money divided along a fault line that had nothing to do with either of them. My father had gotten the better fault line. Marcus spent 30 years telling himself this was an injustice, that the correct order of the universe had been disrupted by an accident of birth order and the arbitrary preferences of a grandfather neither of them liked much anyway. He told this story so many times and so consistently that it had calcified from grievance into gospel. He was brilliant, actually. That's the part people don't expect. He had a gift for logistics, for seeing the shape of supply networks, for understanding where value moved and how to move more of it. My father had recognized this early and brought him into the business, given him responsibility, authority, and compensation that most people in his position would have considered generous. Marcus considered it charity. He smiled at Christmas dinners for 30 years. He sent birthday cards. He held my hand at family gatherings when I was small and called me by my name. And once, when I was 7, helped me find a kitten that had gotten stuck in a garden wall. I remembered the gentleness of his hands. I remember thinking, this is what family feels like. He ordered my parents' deaths on a Wednesday. By Friday, he was calling lawyers. Diane Ashford Morrison was different. Where Marcus burned slow, a coal fire, patient and consuming, Diane burned hot and fast, and had been burning since the moment 5 years before my parents died, when my mother had looked at her across a conference table and said, quietly and without malice, "I don't think you're ready for this yet." My mother had meant it kindly. Diane had never forgiven her. She was capable, driven, had legitimate skills in operations management that my mother had, in fact, planned to eventually promote. But she'd wanted the promotion now, and when it didn't come, she'd decided the problem wasn't her timeline, but my mother's existence. Diane had 2 daughters, twins, 7 years old when the fire happened. I thought about them sometimes in the years that followed. whether they knew, whether Diane had told them something approximating the truth, or something approximating the story Marcus had told himself for 30 years, whether they'd someday have to reckon with what their mother had done. Robert Keene was the simplest of the three, and in some ways the most disturbing for that simplicity. He'd been embezzling from the Ashford accounts for 11 years, small amounts, cleverly moved, nothing that would trigger an audit if the auditors weren't specifically looking. My father had been specifically looking for about 6 months before the fire. Robert had known. He hadn't killed out of grievance or entitlement or a 30-year-old wound that never healed. He'd killed because it was cheaper than being caught. That was it. That was the whole story. My parents were worth less to Robert Keene than the money he'd stolen from them. They wept in well-tailored black at the estate. Marcus was the most convincing. He'd had 30 years of practice at the Christmas dinner performance. Diane kept her grief precise and controlled. Robert cried the most, which I'd learn later was because he was genuinely frightened. Not guilty, frightened. They asked about the business assets without once saying my name. They thought I'd died in the fire. I watched them from the hotel room. I was 14 years old. I was already building the file. That night, I sat on the hotel bed and looked at my hands. The same hands my mother had taught to taste sauce. The same hands my father had positioned on piano keys. Like you're holding an egg. Hold it with attention. The warmth I'd been raised in was gone. Not misplaced, not temporarily absent. Gone. Grief that size doesn't produce tears. It produces a stillness so complete it resembles peace from the outside. It resembles nothing from the inside. Lena sat across from me all night. Didn't speak, didn't leave. In the morning, we're leaving. I stood, packed my bag, and followed her out of the hotel and into the world she'd spent 10 years quietly preparing me for. I didn't look back. Dasha sent 11 messages. Mireille, please, just tell me you're alive. I know you are. I can feel it. I'm wearing the bracelet we made, 6th grade, the terrible beads. I'm keeping it until you come back. I read everyone, didn't reply. Lena taught me that attachments were vulnerabilities. She was right about the danger, catastrophically wrong about the solution. A person with nothing to protect isn't stronger, they're just emptier. I didn't understand this yet. I was 14 and broken, and there was work to do. Part 4. The Making of a Bad Assassin. Another name, an industrial city 300 miles away. Firearms, chemistry, languages, hand to hand. You flinch before you hit, Lena said in the 4th week of hand to hand. Because I'm imagining what it feels like on the other end. She considered this. I cannot remove your empathy, but I can teach you to hold it here, she touched my sternum, rather than in your hands. Feel everything you need to feel, just after, not during. This became the framework for everything. Feel it after, not during. That choice, when to feel, when to wait, felt like more power than any weapon she put in my hands. At 17, you still hesitate. Yes. Unfortunate habit for someone with your last name. I laughed. I wasn't supposed to. I did anyway. Something shifted around her eyes, the structural memory of warmth. Again, she said. This time, I didn't hesitate. Part 5. The Choice in the Mountains. I was 17 when I made the choice that changed the shape of everything. Another town, another name, walking back from the library. The man was dragging the child into the woods. The girl was 5. Blonde hair in uneven pigtails, the pigtails of someone who'd tried to do them herself. My hands moved before my brain finished the sentence. Distance, 200 meters. Wind, negligible. Rifle in my backpack. Assembly, 14 seconds. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to walk away. Except there were no authorities out here, just a 5-year-old girl. And me. I thought about my mother's kitchen, about what had been built inside me and what it was supposed to be for. I exhaled, found the stillness, fired. The man dropped. The girl ran. Later, the man was Gregor Voss, regional head of a trafficking network. The girl was Isla Reeves. My shot saved one child. It also made me visible. "We move again," Lena said. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't care. I'd do it again. I know. That's what worries me. A pause. You've stopped calculating risk. You're calculating purpose. She looked at me for a long time. It's dangerous, and it's the only way to live worth mentioning. That night, I found the bracelet at the bottom of my bag. Cheap beads on an elastic string. Dasha had pressed it into my hand 3 years ago. "Keep this, so you remember you had a friend once." I put it on my wrist. The next morning, I sent one message. "I'm alive. I'm okay. I wanted you to know." 30 seconds later, "I knew it. I have been wearing this terrible bracelet for 3 years. Are you safe?" "Relatively." That's not reassuring. "I know. I'm working on it. Come back eventually, okay? I'll try." Part 6. The World That Ended. The outbreak began in a coastal city. First, viral hemorrhagic fever, unusual presentation. Then, novel pathogen, 3 cities, precautionary measures recommended. Then, the reports developing a quality of barely suppressed panic, the specific register of professional people describing something accurately while hoping very much it isn't true. Then, nothing. The reports stopped. I want to tell you about the night it came to our city. Not the broad strokes, not the statistics or the news cycle or the policy failures. The night itself, what it actually looked like from the inside of it. It was a Wednesday, month 7 of the outbreak, which had been moving across the continent like a slow tide. We'd watched it approach for 6 months, Lena and I, tracking the refugee flows and the government broadcasts and the things people said in the gaps between official statements. We were ready. Or we thought we were ready. Being ready and being ready are 2 different things. The first sign was the smell. I woke at 2 a.m. to something chemical in the air. Not smoke, not gas. Something biological. Something that the oldest part of my brain recognized as wrong before I had identified what it was. Lena was already at the window. "How long?" I asked. "An hour, maybe less." She didn't look away from the street. "Get dressed, take the primary pack, leave everything else." Below us, the street was wrong. Not empty. Full. Fuller than a residential street should be at 2 a.m. People moving in clusters, some purposeful, some stumbling, some standing completely still in the middle of the road in ways that no living person stands. "Lena!" I see them. "How many?" "In this neighborhood?" She finally looked at me. "Enough." We went out the back. The alley behind our building connected to a service road that connected to a rail yard that Lena had scouted 4 months ago and mapped 3 escape routes through. She had the routes memorized. I had them memorized. We moved. The rail yard was where I first saw one up close, not the distant shuffling figures from the window. Up close. He'd been a large man, broad shoulders, work boots, the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades outdoors. He was moving through the rail yard at the specific pace of something that has no destination, just direction, just forward. He turned when he heard us. And here is what I want you to understand about the dead, because I've spent 2 years watching people underestimate them based on stories. His eyes were not blank. That's the thing. The stories always get it wrong. His eyes were not vacant or glazed or the eyes of something empty. They were focused, intensely, completely, terrifyingly focused. On us, on the sound we'd made, on the information his changed nervous system was processing and directing toward a single purpose. He had never been more focused on anything in his life. That was the horror. Not emptiness. Purpose. Lena's hand on my arm. Don't run. Movement triggers tracking. Walk. Steady pace. Don't look at it. We walked. He followed. For 47 steps, I listened to footsteps behind me and practiced every stillness exercise Lena had ever taught me and held the center point she'd given me at 4 years old and did not run. At step 48, Lena stopped. At step 49, the sound behind us stopped too. He'd found something else, a sound from a building on our left, someone inside, moving, living, louder than we were. We moved again. Faster. I didn't look back. We reached our prepared location by dawn. That was month 0. By month 3, the city had completely changed character. By month 6, what had been a city of 400,000 people was something else. A geography, a terrain, a landscape of collapsed social structure and changed biology, and the specific silence that descends when a human settlement loses its humanity faster than it loses its buildings. The buildings remained. The people in them did not. And the dead themselves changed. This is the part that the early reports couldn't have predicted, the plasticity of whatever the pathogen had done. The infected weren't static. They adapted. By month 3, they'd begun grouping. Not coordinating, they weren't capable of coordination, but clustering around areas of movement and sound create dense zones that are significantly more dangerous than isolated individuals. By month 6, the clusters had developed rudimentary spatial memory. They returned to places where they'd previously found prey. They avoided areas where they'd previously been repelled. They were learning. Not thinking, not planning, learning the way animals learn, not through reason, but through consequence, through the slow accumulation of stimulus and response until behavior changes. And then the blue rain fell, and some of them changed further. The changed ones, faster, more focused, with a hunger that seemed almost personal, were something new. Something the original pathogen hadn't produced, something the rain had made. But more on that. I'm getting ahead of myself. The dead are not fast. Their horror is in their patience. They don't tire, don't negotiate, don't respond to reasoning or pleading or the desperate bargaining humans reach for when everything else fails. They simply continue with the focused, indifferent persistence of the weather. You cannot argue with the weather. You can only prepare for it. Lena had been preparing for 6 months before the first official case. When our city fell, we were already gone. Not luck. 17 years of preparation finally become necessary. Part 7. Blue Rain and the Becoming. 9 months in. Dead city. Looking for antibiotics. 11 of them are between me and the building. And then the rain began. Pale blue, the color of a bruise just beginning to form. The first drop hit the back of my hand. It was warm. Rain is not warm. The second drop hit my forearm. The world slowed down, not metaphorically, actually slowed, like someone had adjusted a dial on reality's fundamental controls. A drop of rain took 4 full seconds to travel 8 inches. The dead moved like things in deep water, and I was moving at normal speed. No, faster. I stepped off the fire escape, dropped 12 feet, and landed without a sound before I'd consciously decided to move. The gaps between moments, the spaces I'd been learning to inhabit since I was 4 years old, they were real now, navigable, mine. I moved through all 11 in 40 seconds, retrieved the medical supplies, got out. That night, sitting in our shelter while Lena slept, I held my own hand in the dark and thought about what had just happened. And then I went looking through Lena's files. The files she kept encrypted on a drive I'd known about for years, but had never accessed because she hadn't given me the password. She'd written the password in the back of a journal I'd found 3 months earlier. I'd been waiting to use it until I needed to. This felt like needing to. What I found in those files rearranged everything I thought I understood about my own life. Lena had been part of the Threshold Initiative for 22 years. They'd been tracking an anomaly in atmospheric data since the 1990s, a pattern that appeared across global monitoring stations at irregular intervals, always the same signature, always moving. It took them decades to understand what it was. What they eventually determined, a phenomenon deep in the planet's geomagnetic field, building for centuries, had created a different relationship between the Earth and the biosphere above it, including human neurology. The rain was the delivery mechanism. When conditions reached the threshold, they condensed into precipitation that carried the field's charge directly into biological tissue. For most people, the pathogen, the rewriting that produced the dead. For a small subset, people who had developed, through training or rare natural capacity, the ability to exist in the pauses, to inhabit the stillness between moments, the rain didn't rewrite. It amplified. It took what was already there and made it more. My father had been right about more things than he'd known. Silence is where the speed comes from. Lena had spent 14 years building my nervous system into the shape the rain would recognize. She'd known. She'd always known. The initiative had prepared 47 people. 46 hadn't survived the process, or the first contact with the rain, or had survived both and then used the speed too much and gotten stuck. I was subject 47. The last one. And in a folder marked simply with my name and a date 3 days before my parents died, I found a letter written by my father. Mira, if you're reading this, then you've found Lena's files, which means either you are very much your mother's daughter and figured out the password, or Lena gave it to you, which means something has happened that required her to. I don't know which scenario this is. I hope it's the first. There are things I need to tell you. When you were 2 years old, your mother and I were approached by a man named Harlan Voss, Lena's brother. He told us about the initiative, about what they'd been tracking, about what was coming. I won't pretend we believed him immediately. We didn't. It took 18 months, 3 independent assessments, and a conversation with a geophysicist at a university that no longer exists for us to understand that he was telling the truth. By then, you were 3. We had a choice to make. We could keep you safe, keep you in the warmth we'd been building, the kitchen and the piano and the dates of 3, and let you grow up happy and normal and completely unprepared for what was coming. Or we could prepare you. We chose to prepare you, and we chose to do it without telling you, because we didn't know how to tell a child that the world would end before she was grown, and we didn't want that knowledge in your eyes at the dinner table. So we hired Lena, and we kept building the warmth, because Lena told us something we held on to, that the rain wouldn't recognize emptiness. It needed something to amplify, and the best possible thing to amplify in a person was love. The warmth wasn't just for you, it was for the rain. We gave you both, the warmth and the weapon, because we didn't know which you'd need more. I'm sorry we didn't tell you. I'm sorry for all the ways this feels like a betrayal. But I need you to know something. We loved you every day. You and your mother was only beacon of happiness in my life. I know I am bad at showing emotions, but you are the sunshine of my life, sweetie. Don't be angry at it. Don't let them take it from you. You are our impossible girl. Stay impossible. Dad. I read that letter 11 times before I understood what it meant. Not because it was confusing, because grief of that magnitude takes time to move through. I let it move. Part 8. Lena. In the 31st month, Lena was bitten while clearing a pharmacy. I need to tell you about the 13 hours that followed. Not to make you feel the grief. I can't do that. Grief doesn't work by proxy. but because Lena spent 14 years teaching me things in fragments and silences and dry remarks about paper circles. And these 13 hours were the only time she ever put it all together. The only time she talked to me like I was the person she'd spent 14 years building, instead of the person she was still building. We were in an abandoned fire station. Concrete floors, industrial shelving, a calendar still on the wall from a year that felt like another geological epoch. The bite was on her left forearm. She'd wrapped it without drama and finished the pharmacy sweep before telling me. Lena. I've administered the antivirals. They won't prevent it, they'll slow it. She checked her watch. 13 hours, probably. We should... There's nothing to do. Sit down. I sat down. She sat across from me. We looked at each other. I don't know how to do this, I said. That's all right. Neither do I. A pause. I've prepared for most things, not this. You prepared for your own death. Tactically, not emotionally. Different skills. She looked at her hands. I owe you some things. She told me everything in those 13 hours. Not just the initiative, I'd found that in the files. The other things, the things she'd never said aloud. She told me about being 26 and recruited by her brother Harlan, who'd spent 5 years inside the initiative and was convinced that what they were tracking was real and was coming. She told me about training 46 people over 15 years, about the 31 who hadn't survived the preparation, about the 9 who'd survived but hadn't been compatible with the rain, about the 6 who'd used the speed too much and gotten stuck between moments, 3 of whom she'd found herself, standing in various locations, eyes open, elsewhere, permanently. She told me she'd almost quit after the 38th failure. She told me she'd been assigned to me 3 months before I was born. My parents didn't contact you, I said. No, I found them. They thought they found you. I know, that was intentional. She almost smiled. Your parents were the first compatible pair I'd identified. 2 people whose neurology suggested their child had a high probability of compatibility. I needed to be there from the beginning, so I arranged to be findable. You manipulated them. Yes. And then you grew to care about them. A long pause. Yes. Did you know they were going to die? I knew the faction had become active. I knew they were planning something. I got you out of the house that afternoon. She looked at the calendar on the wall. I didn't know it would happen that day. If I had, you would have gotten them out too. Yes. I believed her. I believed her because Lena was constitutionally incapable of lying about operational matters, and because the grief on her face in those first hours after the fire, the grief she'd locked immediately behind her professional face, had been real. I'd seen it. I'd been 14 and devastated, and I'd still seen it. She had loved them. In whatever way Lena Voss loved things, carefully, at a distance, in the specific language of someone who'd spent 20 years preparing people for catastrophes and losing most of them, she had loved my parents. In hour 6, she told me about the compound interest. You're going to push too hard, she said. I know you. You're going to decide the mission justifies the cost, and you're going to borrow too much, and someday you're going to miscalculate. I know the threshold. You know the numbers. Numbers are not the same as knowing. The knowing only comes from watching someone go over the threshold and not come back. She looked at me steadily. I've watched 6. Remember the man in the alley on the east side? I remember. He used the speed for 4 minutes and 30 seconds over 3 days. Each time he thought he was managing the debt, each time the ratio was slightly worse than he'd calculated, and then on the 3rd day, she stopped. He didn't come back. He didn't come back, and he'd been the most disciplined of all of them up to that point. A pause. Discipline is not the same as safety, Remember that." "I'll remember." "You'll remember, and you'll still push too hard, and someday you'll have to choose between the threshold and something you love, and I won't be there to tell you which way to go." "Which way should I go?" She was quiet for a long time. "I think," she said finally, "that the threshold is worth risking for the right thing. I think that's what all of this was for. Not safety. Choice." A pause. "I'm just telling you to be certain before you risk it, to know what you're choosing and why." In hour 10, she told me about attachment. "I was wrong," she said. "About which part?" "The attachment question. I spent 14 years teaching you to hold people at a distance, to treat relationships as tactical variables." A pause. "I was wrong." "I know. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway." She looked at me. "The 6 who got stuck, the ones who went over the threshold, none of them had people. They'd followed my training too well. They'd made themselves operationally clean. And when they had to choose between the threshold and the mission," she stopped. "They chose the mission because there was nothing else." "They had nothing to come back for." "Yes." A long pause. "You have things to come back for. Keep them. No matter what I told you before. Keep them." In hour 12, she said, "You were a terrible assassin." "I know. Too much feeling. Too much thinking. I know." She smiled. Small, real. The warmth around her eyes fully present. "Good. Don't stop." "Lena, one more thing. The bracelet." "What?" "I know about Dasha. I've always known. I could have made you cut contact." She held my gaze. "I chose not to." "Why?" "Because you needed something the training couldn't give you. Something to remember what you were building for." A pause. "She's why you're still you. Don't lose that." At hour 12, she looked at her watch. "Now," she said. I kept my promise. One shot. Clean. The way she'd taught me. I buried her in a garden behind the fire station. I marked the grave with stones. I sat beside it. And then I did something Lena would have found operationally inefficient. I stayed there for 3 hours and felt everything. The grief came in waves. Not tears, not at first, but a physical weight that moved through my chest in rhythmic pulses, each one carrying something specific, a memory, a lesson. The particular dry inflection she used when she thought something was funny but wasn't going to admit it. Barely is not never. The paper circle's opinion is not the metric I'm optimizing for. Better late than never. I felt the weight of being the 47th attempt at something she'd been trying to build for 15 years. The weight of being the one who'd survived when 36 others hadn't. The weight of being what she'd given her life to create. Not just these last 13 hours, but all of it. Every year, starting before I was born. She'd spent 22 years building toward this. And now she was stones in a garden, and I was all that was left of it. I sat with that until I could carry it. Then I stood up. There was work to do. Part 9. What the Rain Built. 3 months later, I found the survivors. A school building. 40 people, slowly starving in an organized fashion, which is a very human way to approach a crisis. And one of them was a girl with blonde hair that had grown out from uneven pigtails. 12 now. The same eyes. Isla Reeves. Alive because 5 years ago in the mountains, I had chosen to act. She didn't recognize me. I recognized her. I thought about Felix's buildings that didn't exist yet. I knocked. They let me in. Cautious, armed, desperate. Desperation makes people take risks. I've built a career on it. "I can help," I said. "Who are you?" "Mireille Ashford. I know how to survive this." A man near the back, 40s, teacher's build. The patient look of someone who'd spent years explaining things to people not listening, studied me. His name was Marcus. He'd taught high school history before the world stopped having high schools. He'd lost his wife in month 2 and his daughter in month 4, and had spent the 6 months since then looking after 40 strangers with the grim dedication of someone who had decided if he couldn't save the people he loved, he would save the people in front of him. I liked him immediately, which was, as always, inconvenient. I taught them what Lena had taught me. The group grew. 40 to 60, 60 to 80. One afternoon, while clearing a building, I froze. A woman, changed, dead. But she was still holding a photograph, some ghost of an impulse surviving the person who'd had it. Marcus saw me stop. "Give me a second," I said. He stepped forward and took care of it. Afterward, "Lena was wrong," he said. "About which part?" "The part where you separate feeling from surviving. The people who get through this without feeling anything, they're the ones who'll build the next version of what we're trying to leave behind." He looked at me. "You feel things and you're still standing. That's not a flaw. That's the whole point of everything." He reminded me of my father, not in any specific way, in the fundamental way, in the quality of presence, the steadiness, the specific warmth of someone who decided that the people around them mattered and acted accordingly, every day, without drama. I'd lost that quality when I lost my father. I hadn't expected to find it again. Dasha and I messaged when the signal held. She'd made it through the first months by sheer force of will and the practical survival instincts that come from growing up with 4 brothers. She'd joined a community on the western edge of the city, 40 people in a converted warehouse organized by a former restaurant manager with a gift for logistics. She sent me updates. I sent her information, supply routes, areas to avoid, the specific behavioral patterns of the changed ones that most people hadn't figured out yet. We didn't talk about whether we'd see each other again. We didn't need to. The bracelet was still on my wrist. I knew she was still wearing hers. Some things don't require verbal confirmation. Felix sent one message in month 14. "I'm alive. I'm in the Western Territories. I've been building." "What are you building?" "Things that might last." "Are you okay?" "Mostly. Are you?" "Same. I'll show you what I'm building when this is over." "When it's over," I wrote back. "When it's over." One evening, Isla found me in the library. "Why do you help us? You could survive alone." "Because someone helped me once, and I'm still here because of it." She was quiet. Then, "I remember something. From when I was little. A man grabbed me. There was a sound like thunder. He fell. I ran." She reached into her pocket. "I kept this from that day." A stone. Small, smooth, mountain gray. "I always knew someone chose to save me. I just wanted to say thank you, even if I never found out who." She placed it in my hand. She looked at me. I looked at her. "You're welcome," I said. The speed was becoming a problem. The debt ratio was worsening. 30 seconds of borrowed time was costing 90 minutes instead of 90 seconds. The compounding was accelerating in ways Lena's files hadn't fully predicted. And I was slipping into the gaps without meaning to, losing seconds, once losing 7 hours from 30 seconds of use. Marcus found me afterward, disoriented in a corridor. 7 hours, he said. "I know." "Then stop. We need you, not the speed. You. The speed is a tool. You're a person. There's a difference, and you keep forgetting it." That night, I messaged Dasha. "I think I'm losing myself. The thing that makes me useful is taking more than it gives." "Then stop being useful. Be you." "What if they're the same thing now?" Her reply took a few minutes. "They're not. The you that exists without the speed, she's still there. She sent me a message 3 years ago apologizing for disappearing. She wears a terrible bracelet. She knocked on a door when she could have walked past, That's you. The speed is just something she can do. I looked at the bracelet. Still there. The next day, I stopped using the speed unless there was no alternative. Harder, slower, but present. Anchored. Here. The speed was what I could do, not who I was. Part 10. The Reckoning. The government announced vaccine trials in the 28th month. The world was stabilizing, which meant justice could mean something again. I'd been building the file for 3 years. Marcus Ashford, Diane Ashford Morrison, Robert Keene, the people who'd killed my parents and spent the apocalypse leveraging the Ashford name to build weapons networks across the continent. They'd also been eliminating competition, other survivor communities, people trying to rebuild, by herding the infected towards settlements, making it look like bad luck. It wasn't bad luck. It was a quarterly strategy meeting. When my Marcus brought me the evidence, communications logs, coordinates, the locations of communities that no longer existed, I sat with it for a long time. How many people? I asked. 3 settlements confirmed, probably more. Hundreds. For market share. That's how he thinks about it. I'd been thinking about Marcus Ashford for 3 years, about what kind of man spends 30 years telling himself a story about injustice until the story becomes justification for murder, about the Christmas dinners and the birthday cards and the gentle hands helping a 7-year-old find a kitten in a garden wall, about how the most dangerous people aren't the ones who know they're doing wrong. They're the ones who've convinced themselves they're correcting an imbalance. What are you thinking? My Marcus asked. That I need to be careful about what I'm doing this for. What do you mean? There's a version of this where I go for them because it's right, because they're still killing people and someone has to stop them. And there's a version where I go for them because they killed my parents, and I've been waiting 6 years, and I'm angry. And the difference matters? The difference is everything. One of those versions makes me a person. The other makes me Marcus Ashford. He was quiet for a moment. So, which is it? I don't know yet. That's the problem. I talked to Isla. When you think about the man in the mountains, I said, do you think about him? Sometimes. Does it bother you? What did I do? She looked at me like I asked something obvious. He was going to hurt me. You stopped him. I'm alive because of that choice. A pause. Both things are true simultaneously. Yes. So why are you asking? Because I'm about to make another choice, a bigger one, and I want to be sure I know why. She considered this. The people who killed your parents, are they still hurting people? Yes. Then I think you already know why. 2 days before I was planning to move, Marcus came to me. He has hostages, he said. 8 people. Former employees who tried to leave. 3 children. He put the photographs on the table. 3 women, 2 men, 3 children. One of the children is maybe 6 years old. If you go in loud, he kills them. If he realizes there's a breach before you reach him, he kills them. But maybe you reach him before he can give the order. Maybe they live. Maybe. I ran every calculation. Every path required speed. Not 30 seconds, not 60. 3 minutes. 180 seconds borrowed. The debt at current ratios is catastrophic. The compounding had accelerated. Lena's files flagged a threshold warning in my physiology readings from the previous month. 180 seconds might push me past the threshold. 180 seconds might mean I never came back from the gaps. The man in the alley on the east side, standing, eyes open, elsewhere. That. I called Dasha the night before. What's wrong? She said before I'd finished hello. Something I have to do might break me. Permanently. But if I don't do it, 8 people die who didn't ask to be in the middle of this. Is there another way? I've looked for 3 days. Silence. Mireille, can I say something without you arguing until I'm done? Yes. You've been punishing yourself for 3 years, for surviving when your parents didn't, for the fire. I know you have. But this isn't that. This is you choosing 8 people, the same way you chose Isla 5 years ago. Her voice was steady. That's who you are. Not the speed, not the empire, the choosing. And if I get stuck? A long pause. Then you end as someone who chose 8 people over themselves. That's a better ending than most people get. I didn't have an answer for that. Come back, she said. But if you can't, know I'm still wearing the bracelet. Marcus Ashford's compound was 300 miles east. I approached at midnight, found my center, the stillness, stepped sideways. The compound was designed by someone who'd anticipated this exact scenario: multiple redundant security systems, guards and overlapping patrol patterns, motion sensors with genuine coverage rather than the gaps that cheaper installations leave. Good security design. Not good enough for someone who exists between moments. 30 seconds. Perimeter cleared. The migraines started immediately, sharper than usual, with a quality I hadn't felt before, less like pain, more like the world is beginning to question my right to occupy it. 50 seconds. East wing. Guards outside the locked rooms. 60. 70. 10 seconds over budget. My vision started layering, the same corridor in multiple versions, stacked translucent on each other, the threshold making itself felt. I cleared the guards, picked the locks. 8 people stared at me like I was something impossible. Maybe I was. Go, I said. East exit, now. Who are you? One of the women asked. Someone who's choosing you. Please move. They moved. West wing. Top floor. 100 seconds. 110. 120. I could feel the gaps trying to keep me, the warmth of them, the pull. Hold it with attention. I held. 130. His office door, reinforced, locked. No time to pick it. I hit it at exactly the angle, exactly the weak point. It gave. 140 seconds. Marcus Ashford looked up. I had my hand over his panic button before he finished reaching. Hello, Marcus. I'm Mireille Ashford, the heir you tried to erase. He stared at my hand, blurred at the edges, after images not fully resolved. What are you? What you made necessary. The rain people, he said. Clearly not enough. Tell me why you killed them. He didn't pretend to know what I meant. He was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone deciding whether to answer, the quiet of someone deciding how to frame the answer they've rehearsed. Your father, he said, built everything he had on a foundation that included me, my work, my judgment, my relationships. For 30 years, I was the one who solved the problems that couldn't be solved in a boardroom. The difficult accounts, the clients who needed managing, the situations where the official answer was insufficient. His voice was controlled, precise. And at Christmas dinner, with the whole family present, he called me indispensable. He called me loyal. He said he couldn't do it without me. A pause. And he meant it as a compliment. It was a compliment. It was a description of my function, indispensable, loyal. These are words for tools, not for family. For the first time, something moved under the controlled surface. Not anger, something older and more settled. I was family. I had been family since we were children in the same house, and he never once... He stopped. He never once looked at me the way he looked at you. 150 seconds. The world nearly stopped. His chest is barely moving. So you killed them, I said, for a look? For 30 years of being the mechanism behind a machine that never acknowledged I was more than a mechanism. He met my eyes. You can call it pathetic if you want. I know how it sounds from the outside, but you weren't in it. You don't know what it does to a person to spend 30 years being almost something. You helped a 7-year-old find her kitten, I said. He blinked. I remember your hands. You were gentle. A pause. How does the man with those hands order a fire? Something happened in his face. A fracture. Small, quickly sealed, but real. That man, he said quietly, decided that the person he'd been for 50 years hadn't gotten him what he deserved, and decided to be a different person. And what did that person get you? 160 seconds. Everything, he said. For 3 years. Everything. Everything built on bodies. Most things are. I just stopped pretending otherwise. 165 seconds. The gaps were warm. Genuinely warm. My father. The pause is where the power lives. My mother. Never let the world decide who you are. Lena, hour 10. Keep them. No matter what I told you before, keep them. I held. Before you decide, Marcus said, and I noticed he wasn't afraid anymore, which was interesting. There's something you should know. What? I'm one of 33 operations. Same network, same tactics. Kill me and they absorb my territory within a week. You'll have committed murder and accomplished exactly nothing except satisfying a 6-year-old need for justice. I don't need justice to feel satisfied. I need it to be justice. Then check the files. His eyes moved to the third drawer. Encrypted drive. Everything. Names, locations, evidence. The whole network. He looked back at me. Or you can kill me right now and never have any of it. Your choice. 170 seconds. The threshold. The man in the alley. If I retrieved the drive, I went over. If I didn't, 32 operations continued. I thought about what Lena had said in hour 6. I think that the threshold is worth risking for the right thing. I'm just telling you to be certain before you risk it, to know what you're choosing and why. I knew what I was choosing. I knew why. 175 seconds. I opened the third drawer, retrieved the drive. 180 seconds. The world stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Complete stillness, complete silence, the warmth of the gaps pressing in from every direction like an embrace that didn't intend to release. I understood for the first time why people didn't come back. It was so still. It was everything Lena had ever told me to find, and it wanted to keep me. Hold it with attention. I held. Like you're holding an egg. I held. Don't let the carrot feel lonely. That one, absurdly, was what did it. I almost laughed. And the world lurched back. I was moving, barely, sideways, wrong, toward the door. Behind me, Marcus Ashford said something. I don't know what. I was already in the corridor, the stairwell, outside, the ground. Then, not moving. Part 11. The Aftermath. Marcus found me 4 hours later. My Marcus, the teacher. I was still on the ground, still uncertain about when I was. The hostages? I asked. Safe, all of them. You got them out. Marcus Ashford? Alive. In his office, security has him. The provisional government is on the way. The drive. In your hand. You've been holding it for 4 hours. I want to tell you what the next 6 days actually felt like, because a paragraph doesn't do it. Day 1. I couldn't tell what time it was. Not from a watch. I could read a watch. I couldn't tell whether an hour had passed or 10 minutes. My internal sense of duration had come completely unmoored. Marcus would tell me it was noon, and my body would insist it was 3 a.m., and then 20 minutes later insist it was 7 p.m. I kept reaching for the speed without meaning to, the way you reach for something that's no longer in its place. The gesture completes before the absence registers. Except when I reached for it, I'd get a migraine spike that lasted 40 minutes. Marcus sat with me. He brought food. He talked about history, about what he'd taught before the world changed, about his daughter's habit of naming every insect she found. Not because I was responding much, just to fill the silence with something human. It helped more than he knew. Day 2. The time sense came back partially. I could track hours again, though minutes were still unreliable. The grief arrived on day 2. Not grief for the speed, not exactly. Grief for the version of me that had existed before I went over the threshold. The one who could use the speed more freely, who could borrow time without the ratio being so punishing. 75% of my capacity gone. I'd known this was a possible cost. I'd chosen to pay it. Knowing you've chosen something and actually living with the choice are different skills. I spent most of day 2 in the library, reading, trying to remember who I was when I wasn't the speed, trying to find the person Dasha had described, the one who knocked on doors, who wore terrible bracelets, who had existed before the rain fell and would have to go on existing now. I found her eventually. She was there, a little harder to access than before, a little more buried under the layers of everything that had happened, but there. Day 3. I started testing the new parameters. 10 seconds of speed now costs 40 seconds of disorientation. The ratio had permanently worsened from 3-fold to 4-fold. And the threshold, which had felt distant once, then close, then catastrophically close, was now something I could feel constantly, like a wall I was always aware of standing near. I could still use the speed, just less, just more carefully, just with a much clearer understanding of the cost. Lena would have said this was the correct lesson to learn. She would have said it without sympathy, because sympathy wasn't her language, but she would have meant it. I almost heard her say it. I sat with that for a while. Day 4. Marcus brought me something. A letter. Not from Lena. I had all of Lena's letters. This was from Diane Ashford Morrison. Handwritten, 3 pages, delivered through the provisional government channels that were starting to function again. I want to tell you what was in it, because I think it's important. She wrote about her daughters, the twins, 13 now, having spent the apocalypse years in a protected compound their mother had arranged, not knowing why their mother had arranged it or what she'd done to afford it. Diane wrote that she'd told them. Not everything. Enough. And that her daughters had stopped speaking to her. She wrote, I spent 5 years telling myself that what I did was practical, that I had removed a structural inefficiency in a business I had contributed to as much as anyone. I used every word I had to avoid the simple word, which is that I killed people. I killed your parents. People who had not been cruel to me, only insufficient. And I spent 5 years not saying that word, because if I said it, I would have to be a person who had done that thing. I'm saying it now because my daughters needed to hear it, and because you deserve to hear it. I am not asking you to forgive me. I don't think forgiveness is something you owe me. I am telling you that I know what I did, and I am telling you that it was wrong, and I am telling you that I am sorry. Not because sorry changes anything, but because you deserve to hear it from me before a court says it for me. She was convicted 4 months later. 22 years. Her daughters did not attend the sentencing. I didn't attend either. One of them, the bolder twin, I was told, sent me a handwritten note 3 weeks after the verdict. I'm sorry for what our mother did to your family. I don't know how to be her daughter right now, but I know it wasn't your fault, and I know it wasn't ours either. I thought you should know someone in our family understands that. I wrote back. 1 line. Your mother told me you stopped speaking to her. That took courage. I hope someday you find a way to carry it without it crushing you. I don't know if they did. But I kept her letter, and I kept Diane's, and I put them in the same drawer. Same building blocks, different architecture. My mother would have appreciated that. Robert Keene's trial was simpler. He pleaded guilty to avoid the full weight of the evidence, accepted a sentence of 15 years in exchange for cooperation with the network investigation. He cried at the sentencing. Genuine tears, I think. Not for my parents, but for himself, for what the calculation had cost him. He'd killed 2 people because it was cheaper than being caught, and in the end, it had cost him everything anyway. I felt nothing in particular about Robert Keene, which was, in its way, the most fitting thing I could feel. Day 6, I could stand without the world tilting, could hold a conversation without losing the thread, could look at a clock and trust what it said. I sat in the library that morning and thought about what I'd traded. 75% of my speed. For 8 hostages, alive. For evidence that brought down a network killing hundreds. For the choice to do this through a system rather than by my own hand. For the kind of person I wanted to be on the other side of this. Worth it? I'd know better in 10 years. For now, I was still here, still human, still choosing. That had to be enough. Epilogue. The Queen of the After. The vaccine reached full distribution in the 38th month. I was 20 years old when I stood in my parents' library, restored, catching the evening light exactly as it always had, and understood what their love had been for. Not to keep me safe, to build something inside me that could survive anything. They'd given me both, the warmth and the weapon, the kitchen and the training, the piano lessons and the target practice. And I was still here, and what they'd built was still standing. The board met on a Thursday. I walked in with my mother's spine and my father's restraint and Lena's precision, showed them the financial architecture, the relationships, the organizational knowledge. By the end of the meeting, there was no question. An older board member who'd known my father for 30 years looked at me across the table. "You're very like him." I thought about piano lessons, about holding it with attention. "I know," I said. He'd be proud. I didn't cry. After, not during. Marcus Ashford died in prison 11 months after sentencing. Heart failure, the report said. I don't know what I feel about that. I've turned the question over several times and kept arriving at something that isn't satisfaction, and isn't grief, and isn't quite indifference. Something more like, and so? He'd spent 30 years building towards something he believed he deserved. He'd gotten it, briefly, and then lost it to a 20-year-old in a compound in the dark. And so? Dasha visited once the travel restrictions lifted. She sat in the library, evening light coming through the west-facing windows, and looked at me for a long time. "You're different," she said. "Most of me. The part that matters?" I showed her the bracelet. She pulled up her sleeve, her matching bracelet, equally worn, equally stubborn. "Told you, some things you just don't let go of." She stayed for a week. We talked about everything and nothing. She argued with 40% of my reconstruction plans. It was the best week I'd had in 6 years. Felix arrived the following month. He'd been building something in the Western Territories. He showed me the plans across the library table, his hands moving the same way they'd moved over notebook sketches in the school cafeteria. Load-bearing walls, natural light, space for people to remember they were people. He called it Hope Station. "I want the Ashford Foundation to fund it," he said. "We will. One condition." "What?" "The library, west-facing, so it catches the evening light." He smiled, the same patient smile from the cafeteria, the same fundamental Felixness that the end of the world hadn't managed to touch. "It's already in the plans," he said. "I drew it first." Isla turned 13 in the school building that had become the first Ashford Foundation facility. Marcus threw her a party with real food. Sarah managed the cake, which was a miracle of post-apocalyptic improvisation, involving reconstituted flour and something that was almost chocolate. Isla opened her presents and then came and stood beside me, where I was watching from the doorway. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About what you told me, about someone helping you once and you being still alive because of it." A pause. "Do you think that's how it works? Those choices keep going? Like—" she searched for the word. "Like compounding," I said. "Yes, like that." "I think so," I said. "I think that's exactly how it works." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her party. I stood in the doorway and watched the room. Marcus with his patient warmth, Sarah with her insistence on making real food, David navigating the space in the chair he'd designed himself, the children who'd learned to stand the way I stood and would someday teach others. All of it. Compounding. The blue rain falls sometimes still. I watch it from the west-facing window. I don't stand in it anymore. I've changed enough. The spaces between moments are still there, but I choose to stay here. The end.